Hello again, everybody. It's Playboy's Ghost Channel. I want to talk to you a minute about some of the pushback, the feedback that I've got on one or two things, and I expected this. Anytime you challenge long-held beliefs, often repeated, parroted beliefs, especially stuff that's just repeated over and over again online that people who don't know as much and don't think about things as much take as the gospel, you're going to get a little bit of pushback. So I want to elaborate on something. I had someone take issue with my assertion that the 4570 was more effective than some of the big, higher pressure, higher velocity, big game and dangerous game rifles, and I stand by that. And when I say that, it's not because I'm thinking that the 4570 has, and this is where people like Ron Spomer have gone off in the wrong direction when they've tried to assess and compare the power of the 4570 versus something, super whiz bang Magnum, is they're looking at energy figures. They're looking at, energy figures out at distance, and they're typically using rounds like a Hornady, XTP, or FTX bullets, that plastic tip lighter stuff, and I don't get into that. To me, a hollow point has a purpose, and I like a hollow point for high-speed self-defense or for watermelon destruction. But now, were I to be in big, dangerous game territory, and I'm thinking browns, because, we do have black bears around here and big cats, but I don't consider that necessarily the same thing. But in the story that I related concerning the couple that was, and I was corrected because I had the wrong caliber in mind when I was talking about that, even though I didn't say what caliber I thought it was. This couple was hunting, and they shot it, I believe it was 400 yards, correct me if I'm wrong, plus. Shot at this big brown bear, turned out to be like a 10-foot, 6-inch bear. Seems to me, illiterate as I am on bears, that's a big bear. I know it would be big in my book. Shot it at over 400 yards, and it absorbed at least 3 hits. One was, if I'm not mistaken, went through a shoulder. The other hit vitals, and the other was just off of a spine shot, which that's what they really needed. Using if I remember right from the video, roughly a 225 grain super whatever bullets, I'm sure they designed it to be a heavy penetrator as best that they could with this light little caliber. Moving at about 3,200 feet per second from the muzzle. Don't know what it was doing at 400 yards. Said that the bear reacted as though it were bee stings, and this bear ended up pursuing them, charging them, I guess, if you can call it a slow motion charge through, really deep snow for 400 yards. And then some more followed them, and this guy, the rifle malfunctioned. The guy ended up, thank goodness he was able to, and he had a 454 Casull, and with 4 shots from a 454 Casull, I don't think all 4 of them hit. He finally stopped the charge, and the bear slid off and died. They survived to live to tell the tale and learn the lessons. Now, first of all, in comparing this with what I imagine a 4570 or how I would employ 4570 or whatever, I'm not taking a 400-yard shot at a bear, no way. So, if you're going to take a 400-yard shot, and he may have killed a bunch of bears with this gun in the past, I don't know, but today wasn't his day. And it wasn't the day for this, and I know a 338 Ultra Mag is a bad caliber, don't get me wrong. But it's not what I would choose for something where, you may be looking, I'm just guessing, you may be looking at, needing a bunch of penetration, this flat, long shooting caliber you need, to have a bullet work some magic in order to get the right mix of penetration and whatever, and where they may have been dealing with not near enough penetration and needing more. There were several trade-offs involved in all of this, and the reason that I say that, first of all, on paper ballistics, when you look at energy figures, I know a lot of people get wrapped up in energy figures, and some of that stuff and all of this hydrostatic shock, that stuff's, and I've got a cheat sheet today, y'all. Some of this stuff, I'm sure, matters more when you're having to worry about if your first concern is flat shooting, like it was when the calibers went from 45 70s and the big calibers down, and they in the military started necking everything down, and sports shooting started thinking about getting everything down smaller to get the flatter shooting calibers. Well, now there immediately you're trading off some stopping power. Oh boy, well, I got some guff for using that. You're trading off some bullet weight, some frontal area of the bullet, and some, in the penetration and everything that comes with it. You're trading that off for flatter shooting. Okay, so now you get down to the smaller calibers that give you that flatter shooting and that longer range, which is where everybody was going, for a long time there, turn of the century and a little bit beyond, turn of the previous century. And they were seeking the flatter shooting and less of a rainbow trajectory. Okay, that's a worthy cause. I understand that. But then there were trade-offs. And in order to get back the diameter you need to really be effective on game animals, bigger game animals, you're going to have some expansion. So now we're dealing with lighter bullets. We're having to drive them, we got them going really fast, and now we're having to design them to expand and to do what they should have done before, and now you're sacrificing penetration. Everything's a trade-off. Everything is a sacrifice, and I know there's people that's watching this that know more about this than me. But, looking at paper ballistics don't tell the whole story because, there are guns there are calibers, there are cartridges, and there are even black powder stuff that can do more in certain situations, get the job done better, and actually perform where lesser calibers, lesser cartridges, even though on paper they may be far superior, can't even come close. Now, once again, with this barrel thing, I'm not talking about a 400-yard shot. I wouldn't have took a 400-yard shot, probably with 45-70, even though people do it and people hit things and whatever, and that's fine and good, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about the cartridge design, the capabilities, whatever. I don't look at the energy. I look at things like the TKO, the Taylor knockout value, which takes into account, we're not just looking at a bullet weight and velocity to predict how it's going to kill. Now we're taking into account the diameter, and hopefully, I'm sure ideally in that TKO figure, people were figuring frontal area of the bullet. Of course, now we know me-plat has something to say about that too, because a bigger me-plat will do this, that, or the other compared to a smaller me-plat. Or nose of the bullet for Allen cast bullet, whatever you want to talk about, however you want to look at it. Let me give you an idea. First of all, this 308 round, this is a, forget the brand name. Anyway, it's whatever Rural King sells, but it's a good round for 308. It shoots great in my Ruger American Predator. This is a 150 grain bullet, advertised at 2,800 feet per second. The Taylor knockout value, TKO, is 18 on this. Gives you an 18 factor. Well, that's a flat shooting flatter shooting than a 45-70 by far, or even a 30-30. And I have used a 308 Winchester with a 150 grain bullet to hammer deer down one shot, no going anywhere, not even kicking, busting both them front shoulders. Well, I turned, the front shoulders on one doe basically to gelatin. At least that's what it felt like when you picked her up. I grabbed her by the front legs. It was kind of rough sounding. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Some of y'all have done this. A lot of y'all have done this. That was effective. But we're not talking about a deep, a white-tailed deer is not a deep body, not a thick body, and you ain't really got to worry too much about stopping a charge of a whitetail. I know deer do kill people, but not typically. They usually run the other direction. So we're talking about a TKO factor there of 18. That 338 load that was in that video, a 225 grain super whiz bang whatever bullet designed to do everything, try to do everything, at roughly 3,200 foot per second. That's a TKO factor of 34. Well, that's a lot more than the 18 of the 308. And I'll go ahead and say there ain't no question that 338 Ultra Mag has to be a dynamic performer in most circumstances against most animals, even at long ranges. That has to be awesome. Not my cup of tea, but it has to be awesome. But there's a TKO of 34. Let me give you just a little sidestep here. From that 338, well, from 308 to TKO of 18, that 338 to TKO of 34, a 45 Colt out of a revolver. If you, not this particular load, this one doesn't rise to a high level. It's a plus P or a Ruger only load. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not going to go ahead and put my hand load up there with something like what Buffalo Bore sells or whatever. But you can get TKO ratings in a 45 Colt out of a revolver between roughly 27 to 32. That 338 Ultra Mag at the muzzle is only a TKO of 34. But 45 Colt can reach a 32 TKO. Now, that's taking into account a lot of things. You know, that right there, in theory, should penetrate very well where that lighter, smaller bullet out of a 308 or even a 338 Ultra Mag, most bullet designs, in order to get the expansion they need to make up for the lack of the diameter they started off with in order to get that flat shooting, they're having to blow up. They got to be not falling apart, but they got to be easily expandable. And that's just a matter of figuring out the amount of expansion, the speed of the expansion versus the penetration. There's there's companies who spend a lot of money and a lot of time researching to get the best bullet in that little bitty caliber so that you get the best of all of these worlds, or at least the best balance of all of these worlds. But now, let's move to 45-70, which the Spomers of the world and a lot of people says is ineffective compared to something like, I had somebody tell me that 338 Ultra Mag will hit an animal a lot harder than your 45-70. Well, yeah, but for how deep? TKO on this not on this round, but the TKO potential on Buffalo Bore's best 45-70 rounds, a freaking 54 compared to the 338 Ultra Mag's 34. How do you figure that 338 is a lot harder hitting? That 338 will hit a watermelon a lot harder, and it's going to blow it up a lot bigger and make it look a lot meaner. But now, what happens when you need to penetrate an animal beyond 2 or 3 foot of penetration? Feet of penetration. I'm not talking about 18, 24 inches. I'm talking about 3, 4, 5, 6 feet. Are you going to do it with that 338 Ultra Mag? Which, once again, taking that particular situation out of the equation because that's a 400-yard shot. But just studying on that. How is that TKO of 54? And I mean, that TKO may not tell the whole story neither, but I'm here to tell you there's something to be said for big, heavy, and even slow over your little, light, and fast. For example, the TKO value of or at least the paper ballistics of a 577 or 575 Minier, a mini bullet, 500 grain plus, out of an old rifle musket, running maybe 1,100 foot per second at most. It's not that daggum impressive on paper. Matter of fact, if you look at it like that on paper, there's probably a lot of spomers in this world who say it's inadequate for deer. Yet, I have seen a gut shot deer go down and die very quickly with a 500 grain 570 or 575 mini bullet. The paper ballistics don't tell the story. Long-held beliefs about effectiveness of cartridges and calibers and what gun writers have sold us along the last, how many decades? Century? Of needing to get the lighter and the faster and it's about driving that velocity and getting the bullet that'll mushroom the biggest and everything. That don't always fix the problem. Now, if you're talking about deer and, to some degree, bigger things like elk or whatever, never hunted a elk or a moose or bear for that matter. But now a little common sense will tell you that if you need penetration, now keep in mind, you can say that 45-70 don't have the stopping power and it don't hit a bear as hard as a 338 Ultra Mag, but there was a bear, even though it was at 400 yards, I'd wager that its velocity and its energy was still way up there. And remember, it's the superior round. That bear absorbed 3 rounds, including 1 shoulder break or 1 shoulder penetration, and a hit to the vitals, and that bear still came 400 plus yards, and it required a handgun to put him down. So don't tell me at 338 hits harder than, something like a 430 grain or even bigger 45-70 with a higher TKO, a lot deeper penetration. And you can look at that little old cast bullet and think, well, that ain't going to do it. Because you live in this world of it's got to expand, it's got to mushroom. Well, yeah, if you start out with a little bitty bullet, moving really fast, it's going to not penetrate. You got to get something out of it. But, if that right there will penetrate 3, 4, 5, 6 feet into something when you really need it to do as much damage as possible, along the way, and sometimes you need deeper damage. I don't know, man. There's not a perfect pill. There's not a perfect caliber cartridge for anything. Just like the people that wanted to argue about the handgun stopping thing. Well, I got news for you. These rifle calibers, these big rifle cartridges, big rifle, ultra Magnum rifle cartridges, they don't always stop threats either. And sometimes certain, and I sure don't mean 9mm, sometimes certain handgun cartridges stop threats in their tracks. There's a lot of things that go into it. And you can't hit 2 deer the same way on the same day with the same cartridge out of the same box of ammo with the same rifle and the same shooter and have them act the exact same way. So you can't make a statement like, well, because handguns don't stop threats. Of course, once again, I'd isolate certain calibers from the equation, from lots of lesser cartridges from the equation. Don't stop threats 100% of the time, then they don't have stopping power. Well, some of those rifles some of those rifles that some of you have argued in favor of and talking about the great superiority of, don't stop 4-legged or 2-legged threats every single time in their tracks. So if we can't say that certain handguns do have stopping power because they don't always stop, then we can't say that those rifle calibers, those cartridges that you love so much and worship so much, have stopping power, because they don't always stop either. It really is just as simple as that. Like I said, just wait till I take on energy transfer and that whole load of horse crap that people believe. I'm sure we will have arguments. But part of the problem is, I think that we're tied up in repeating stuff, and we're seeing it narrowly. We're not bending our mind just a little bit enough to let one of the folds open up so that maybe we can, well, I didn't think about it that way. Some of it is terminology. Some of it is just honest misunderstandings. I don't think that a 338 Ultra Mag is a weak caliber. Matter of fact, from what little I have no experience with it, but from what I've read after studying this encounter, this couple and this bear hunt, it sounds pretty daggum awesome. But I don't care nothing about it. And once again, I'm not taking 406. I believe they had. I'm sure they've taken longer shots. If I remember hearing right in that video, they've took longer shots on game before, but probably nothing as scary and dangerous as what this was for them. I'll take my chances. You remember that encounter, that bear, the woman didn't have a gun with her. We got a malfunction rifle that cannot be fired, and we've got a 5-shot 454 Casull revolver. We're on the 4th shot before the bear stops. The bear was fixing to do something horrific, and they were about to become a statistic. They put all of their faith in a 338 Ultra Magnum. It failed. It was not a stopper that day. That bear would have no doubt died, but that bear didn't read the paper ballistics to find out that it was supposed to be dead. It was ticked off, and it was coming after him and was going to kill him. Let that sink in. It took a handgun, 4th shot of a handgun, to stop a bear that superior cartridge had already tore up enough that it should have been stopped if that superior cartridge was really that superior. I'll take a 45-70. No 400-yard shots. And again, my lungs, my little bank account, I'll never see Alaska. So it really don't matter. Y'all, this has been another point of pointless argument from your host, Plowboy, from Plowboy's Ghost Channel. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people ticked off, but oh well. I wasn't going to do this forever anyway. Talk to y'all later.